The Gilded Spoon was less a restaurant and more a theater. Every evening, a performance of wealth and power took place upon its stage of marble floors and beneath its chandeliers of cascading crystal. The clientele was the cast, and the staff were the silent, efficient stagehands. Among them, Elara Vance moved with a practiced grace that made her almost invisible, which was exactly how she liked it. She possessed a quiet dignity, her posture perfect, her service immaculate. She could anticipate a guest's need for a water refill from across the room and navigate the narrow spaces between tables with the fluidity of a dancer. Tonight, Table 7 was occupied by Alistair Sterling. A billionaire with a portfolio as vast as his ego, Sterling was a notoriously difficult regular. He treated the staff not as people, but as extensions of the furniture, and faulty ones at that. "The water is tepid," he'd snapped when Elara had filled his glass. "Is the concept of ice a foreign one to this establishment?" "My apologies, sir. I will bring a fresh glass with ice immediately," Elara had replied, her voice a calm, even sea against his rocky shore. He'd waved a dismissive hand, already scanning the menu with a frown, as if its contents had personally offended him. For the next hour, he was a storm of petty complaints. The steak was a degree past his preferred medium rare. The wine, a vintage that cost more than Elara's monthly rent, was impertinent. With each complaint, Elara responded with unshakable professionalism, her apologies swift and her solutions immediate. She replaced, she retrieved, she soothed. The final straw came with dessert. Sterling had ordered the chocolate lava cake, a house specialty. He took one small bite, put his spoon down with a loud clatter, and pushed the plate away. "This is unacceptable," he declared, his voice rising, intentionally drawing the attention of the surrounding tables. Diners paused, forks halfway to their mouths. "Is the cake not to your liking, sir?" Elara asked, maintaining her composure. "Not to my liking," he boomed, cruel smirk playing on his lips. "It's a gritty, over-sweetened mess. It tastes cheap. Is this what passes for luxury now, or do you just reserve the decent food for clients you deem important?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder than his shout. "Is it because of me? Are you the problem?" He sat back, arms crossed, letting his accusation hang in the suddenly silent air. He was a king on his throne, passing judgment. He wanted to make an example of her, to humiliate this calm, dark-skinned woman who refused to crumble before him. He wanted a reaction. He wanted fear. Elara did not look away. She did not flinch or stammer. The theater of the restaurant held its breath, waiting for the waitress to apologize, to grovel, to dissolve as she was expected to. Instead, she stood a little straighter, a flicker of something, not anger, but recognition, in her eyes. Her expression remained placid, but her gaze became incredibly focused, as if she were looking straight through Sterling's performance to the man underneath. She tilted her head slightly. When she spoke, her voice was as clear and quiet as it had been all evening, yet it sliced through the tension like a razor. "I'm sorry you feel that way, sir," she said. "It's just you look much less celebratory tonight than you did at the Sunstone dinner. The one in the Astoria ballroom." The words were simple. To the other diners, they were confusing, meaningless. But to Alistair Sterling, they were a detonation. The smug, cruel mask on his face didn't just fall, it shattered. His ruddy complexion went chalk white. His jaw, which had been set in a posture of aggressive authority, went slack. He stared at Alara, his eyes wide with a mixture of raw shock and burgeoning panic. The Sunstone dinner. The Astoria ballroom. It wasn't a public event. It was a private, triumphant affair from years ago, a ghost he had long since buried. The entire restaurant was frozen in a tableau of confusion. The silence, once a product of Sterling's manufactured drama, was now a vacuum of genuine shock. Who was this waitress? How could she possibly know about that? Marcus Thorne, the general manager, had been approaching the table, ready to intervene on Alara's behalf. He stopped dead in his tracks when he heard her words and saw Sterling's reaction. He had seen Sterling angry, demanding and condescending, but he had never, in 5 years, seen him look afraid. Marcus moved swiftly. He placed a firm, steadying hand on Sterling's shoulder. "Sir, perhaps we can discuss this in a more private setting," he said, his voice the epitome of control. Sterling didn't seem to hear him. He was still locked on Alara, who held his gaze without malice, her point already made. "Sir," Marcus repeated, more forcefully. This time, Sterling flinched, breaking eye contact with Alara as if snapping out of a trance. With a dazed, uncoordinated movement, he stood up, knocking his chair backward. He gave Alara one last, wild-eyed look before allowing Marcus to guide him away from the table and toward the exit, leaving a room full of unanswered questions and a single, uneaten lava cake. Once Sterling was gone, Marcus returned to the floor, his face a mask of professional neutrality. He walked directly to Alara, who was calmly collecting the dessert plate. "Alara," he said, his voice low, "my office." Now, the general manager's office was a small, quiet sanctuary from the controlled chaos of the restaurant. Marcus Thorne closed the door, the muted sounds of cutlery and conversation fading away. He gestured for Alara to sit before taking the seat behind his large oak desk. He took a deep breath, his professional mask finally slipping to reveal a man deeply concerned and utterly intrigued. "Okay, Alara," he began, leaning forward. "Talk to me." "What was that?" Alara sat poised, her hands folded in her lap. "Mr. Sterling didn't recognize me, but I recognized him," she explained, her voice steady. "About 6 years ago, I was a banquet server at the Astoria Hotel. I worked a private dinner in the main ballroom. It was a celebration for a handful of men. Mr. Sterling was the host. They were drinking heavily, celebrating the collapse of a real estate deal and their acquisition of the land. They called it Project Sunstone." She paused, the memory clear in her mind. "Mr. Sterling was boasting," he said, "and I remember the words exactly. The beauty of it is that Henderson trusted me completely. He put up his entire company as collateral, and now I own it all. He's ruined, and I'm a hero." He was laughing. Marcus listened, his expression growing more grim with every word. He had always known Sterling was ruthless, but this was a new level of predatory corruption. Just then, the phone on his desk blared to life. Marcus glanced at the caller ID and his jaw tightened. "OWR," he answered, putting it on speaker. "Marcus?" a panicked voice squawked. "What in God's name happened out there?" "Alastair Sterling just called me, screaming. He says a waitress harassed him, threatened him. He wants her fired. Not tomorrow, not in an hour. Now, he says if she's still on the payroll by the time he gets home, he'll ruin us." Marcus looked at Alara, who sat listening, her expression unchanged. He was at a crossroads. The owners would buckle instantly. Firing Alara was the easy path. The one that guaranteed the restaurant's survival and saved him from a world of trouble. Sterling was a titan, and Alara was, in the grand scheme of things, a waitress. But then he looked at her calm, unwavering eyes. He thought of her dignity on the floor, the quiet power she had wielded against a bully. He thought of the word she had quoted, ruined.
John,
Marcus said, his voice firm. There is more to this story. My employee acted with the utmost professionalism in the face of extreme verbal abuse from Mr. Sterling. I don't care, the owner shrieked. Fire her. No, Marcus said simply. The word hung in the air, absolute. I will not. Alara Vance is one of my best people. If you want her fired, you'll have to fire me too. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a stream of sputtering protests before the owner hung up in a rage. The alliance was forged. Marcus turned to Alara, a new resolve in his eyes. They'll try to force my hand, he said. But I believe you, and a man with that much to hide doesn't just get angry. He gets scared. Let's find out what Project Sunstone really was. The next few days were fraught with tension. The restaurant's owners gave Marcus the silent treatment, clearly hoping he would fold. Alastair Sterling, true to his word, began a subtle but vicious campaign against the Gilded Spoon, leaving scathing online reviews and steering his wealthy associates to other establishments. But Marcus held firm, and Alara continued her shifts, a silent pact of defiance passing between her and her manager each day. Their investigation began with the one concrete detail Alara had provided Project Sunstone. It was a ghost. Initial internet searches yielded nothing. No press releases, no corporate announcements. It was as if the name had been scrubbed from public record. He would have buried it deep. Marcus mused one afternoon, sitting with Alara in his office before the dinner rush. We need someone who knows how to dig. An idea sparked in his mind. David Chen, he said, more to himself than to Alara. Table 12. He comes in every Thursday. He's a financial journalist. A real bulldog. That Thursday, when Mr. Chen came in for his usual meal, Marcus personally attended to his table. After pouring him a glass of wine, he leaned in. David, I have a question for you, entirely off the record, Marcus began. It involves a name and a suspicion. It's about Alastair Sterling. Chen's eyes lit up with interest. Journalists like him lived for such conversations. I'm listening, he said. Have you ever heard of a Project Sunstone? Chen frowned, swirling his wine. The name clearly meant nothing to him, but the combination of a secret project and a controversial billionaire was too tempting to ignore. He pulled out a small notebook. Tell me everything you know. Marcus recounted a carefully edited version of the story, framing it as a tip from a source who had overheard a conversation years ago. He gave Chen the name Sterling had mentioned Henderson. For a week, they heard nothing. Then, late one night, Marcus received a text from Chen. I found it. It's worse than you think. Meet me tomorrow. The next day, Chen laid out a series of documents on Marcus's desk. He had spent days digging through archived financial records, property deeds, and old court filings. Project Sunstone wasn't its corporate name, Chen explained, pointing to a document. It was a land development deal for a low-income housing block. The lead developer was a small but respected firm run by a man named Robert Henderson. Sterling was his silent partner, his investor. The story that emerged from the documents was damning. Sterling had used his capital to systematically sabotage the project from the inside, creating manufactured delays and cost overruns. Then, citing clauses buried deep in their partnership agreement, he'd called in his debt. Henderson, unable to pay, had his company and all its assets, including the land, seized by Sterling for pennies on the dollar. Henderson was bankrupted and professionally destroyed. The community the project was meant to serve got nothing. Sterling later sold the land to a commercial developer for a massive profit. It was a corporate execution, Chen said, his voice grim. Perfectly legal on the surface, but ethically bankrupt. Henderson tried to sue, but Sterling buried him in legal fees. The man lost everything. His firm, his reputation, his home. Alara looked at the papers, her heart heavy. Her memory hadn't just been of a boast, it was of a eulogy for another man's life. Sterling is hosting a charity gala here next month, Marcus said, a plan beginning to form in his mind. For the city's children's fund. He's trying to polish his image. He looked from Chen to Alara. I think it's time the public heard about the real Alistair Sterling. The night of the Sterling Foundation Charity Gala, the gilded spoon was transformed. White linens replaced the usual dark tablecloths, and elaborate floral arrangements scented the air. The city's elite floated through the room, champagne flutes in hand, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. At the center of it all was Alistair Sterling, basking in the glow of adoration, a benevolent philanthropist playing his part to perfection. He believed he had won. The Waitress issue had been silenced, and while that fool Marcus had yet to be fired, it was only a matter of time. Tonight was his victory lap. Marcus had insisted Alara work the gala. I want you to be there when it happens, he'd told her. You started this. She moved through the event with her usual quiet efficiency, an invisible force in her crisp black uniform. David Chen, the journalist, was also there, a press pass on his lapel and a cameraman by his side, ready. After the main course, Sterling took to the small stage at the front of the room. A spotlight found him as he tapped the microphone. Thank you all for being here, he began, his voice smooth and magnanimous. When we look at the faces of our city's children, we see the future. And it is our duty, our privilege, to invest in that future. It's about integrity. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one is looking. As the room prepared to erupt in applause, a calm, clear voice cut through the air. Mr. Sterling. All heads turned. Elora Vance was standing by the side of the stage. She held no tray, no water pitcher. She stood simply as herself. Marcus stood a few feet behind her, a silent pillar of support. Sterling's smile froze on his face. He stared at her, momentarily speechless. I believe you are mistaken, he said, his voice tight with fury. This is a private event. I have a question about integrity, sir. Alara continued, her voice unwavering and carrying across the silent room. My question is about Project Sunstone. I was wondering if your philanthropic spirit extends to the family of Robert Henderson, the man whose company you acquired for a fraction of its value after driving him into bankruptcy. Is he part of the future you're investing in? A collective gasp swept through the audience. The name Robert Henderson was known to some of the older business figures in the room, a ghost of a scandal long past. Chen's camera was rolling, its red light a burning eye fixed on Sterling. Sterling's face turned a shade of mottled purple. The facade of the benevolent billionaire cracked and fell away, revealing the snarling predator beneath. "This is an outrage!" he sputtered into the microphone. "This woman is a disgruntled employee making baseless accusations." "It's not an accusation, sir," Elara said, taking a step closer. "It's a question. Did you or did you not tell your associate in the Astoria ballroom that Henderson's ruin was the beauty of it? Because I was the one pouring your champagne when you said it. It was over. The detail, the location, the exact quote. It was too specific to be a lie." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Phones were raised, recording the spectacular implosion of Alastair Sterling. He stood there, trapped in the spotlight, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. He was exposed, defeated not by a corporate rival or a market crash, but by a waitress he had tried to break, a woman whose memory and integrity he had fatally underestimated. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. David Chen's video of the confrontation went viral before the gala guests had even found their coats. His full investigative report, complete with the record quotes from a dozen of Henderson's former employees and a statement from Henderson himself, was published the next morning. The story of the waitress who silenced a billionaire was everywhere. The name, Project Sunstone, became a hashtag. Official inquiries were launched. The district attorney's office, smelling blood in the water, opened a formal investigation into Alastair Sterling's business practices, using Chen's article as a road map. Within a week, a court had frozen a significant portion of Sterling's assets pending the investigation. His carefully constructed empire of lies and intimidation had been brought down by a single, quiet voice that had refused to be silenced. His reputation was irrevocably shattered. At the Gilded Spoon, the atmosphere was electric. The owners, who had been on the verge of firing Marcus, called an emergency meeting. Faced with a tidal wave of positive press celebrating their manager and employee, and the toxic liability of having ever supported Sterling, they performed a swift and total reversal. They issued a public statement commending the bravery and integrity of our staff, and formally apologizing to Elara for the distress she had endured. But Marcus knew that wasn't enough. In a closed-door meeting, he laid out his terms. 2 days later, an announcement was made to the staff. Elara Vance was being promoted. Her new title was Director of Service and Staff Integrity. Her new role would involve completely overhauling the restaurant's training protocols, creating new, robust policies to protect employees from guest harassment, and serving as an ombudsman for all staff concerns. It was a position created just for her, one that recognized her unique strengths, her grace, her composure, and her unshakable moral compass. Eller accepted. She had never sought a promotion or recognition. She had only sought to do her job with dignity and to stand up for the truth. But as she stood before her colleagues, who erupted in a spontaneous, heartfelt round of applause, she felt a sense of profound vindication. It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a victory for every service worker who had ever been told to just smile and endure. 6 months later, the Gilded Spoon was a different place. The food was still exquisite, the decor still opulent, but the soul of the restaurant had changed. Under Elara's leadership, a new standard had been set. Staff morale was at an all-time high. They worked not in fear of powerful guests, but with the confidence that their management would always have their back. The story of Alara and Sterling had become a local legend, and the restaurant was now more popular than ever, attracting a clientele who came not just for the food, but to support an establishment that stood for something more. Alara's influence spread beyond the restaurant's walls. She was invited to speak at hospitality conferences and industry panels, her story inspiring a broader conversation about dignity and respect in the service world. Other restaurants began adopting the Vance protocols. As they came to be known, she had not set out to be a revolutionary, but her quiet act of courage had started a revolution nonetheless. One rainy Tuesday evening, Alara was walking the floor, observing the service. She saw a new waiter, a young man named Leo, looking nervous as he approached a table of loud, demanding businessmen. She saw him flinch slightly at a sharp remark. Alara walked over, not to the table, but to Leo as he was leaving it. She gently touched his arm, guiding him toward the service station. "Are you all right, Leo?" she asked softly.
"Yes, Mum."
"They're just a little intense," he stammered. Alara looked at him, seeing the same anxiety she had felt 1,000 times. "Remember what we talked about in training," she said, her voice both kind and firm. "You are a professional, not a target. Your dignity is not on the menu. If a guest ever crosses a line, you don't have to handle it alone. You come and get me, or you get Marcus. We will handle it, always." Leo looked at her, his shoulders straightening. "Yes, Mum," he said, a genuine smile replacing his worried frown. "Thank you." As she watched him walk back to his station with a newfound confidence, Alara felt a deep sense of peace. Alistair Sterling had tried to make her feel small, to remind her of her low status. But he had only reminded her of her strength. Her journey had taught her, and now she could teach others, a simple but powerful truth. Integrity is a force that can't be bought, bullied, or broken. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one who quietly refuses to be invisible. Did this story resonate with you? The idea that one person's integrity can challenge a corrupt system is a powerful one. If you believe in the strength of quiet courage, give this video a like and subscribe for more stories about unsung heroes. Let us know in the comments below about a time you witnessed someone stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. Thanks for watching.